Imagine walking into a crime scene, right? You're a detective.
Okay, yeah.
You immediately start dusting for prints on the windowsill. You swab for DNA on a broken glass, and you start pulling cell tower pings to place a suspect in the room.
Right, the usual drill.
Exactly. It's all very clinical, very standard, and honestly, entirely human-centric. But as you're doing all this, you're completely ignoring, like, the most important witness in the room.
Which is the victim's pet.
Yes, the pet. And welcome to today's deep dive, where we are looking at the ultimate silent witnesses who share our homes. Because we've got a stack of sources today detailing 4 incredible cases where a cockatoo, a golden retriever, a parrot, and a white cat didn't just, passively watch a crime happen.
No, they actively helped catch their owner's killers.
It's unreal. And these stories are, well, they're intense.
They are. It really marks a profound shift in how we approach forensic science, I think. Because while these are undeniably tragic stories of human violence, they also highlight this incredible, often overlooked intersection between animal behavior and the justice system.
Yeah, completely.
We tend to view our pets as just, existing in the background of our space.
Mm-hmm.
But they're constantly interacting with it, absorbing it, and in some cases, reacting to trauma in ways that leave an undeniable, trackable forensic trail.
So let's start by looking at the physical ways animals react to a crisis. Take Dallas, Texas, in December of 2001.
Okay.
A 48-year-old man named Kevin Butler is found murdered in his home. Now, Kevin was known in his Pleasant Grove neighborhood as a guy with just a huge heart. He ran a local swimming pool company, lived alone, but he was always taking in stray cats and dogs from the street.
One of those people who just, can't say no to an animal in need.
Exactly. But out of all the rescues, the animal he was closest to was an 18-inch white-crested cockatoo named Bird. And Bird was famously fiercely protective of Kevin.
Right. And to understand why a bird would get involved in a violent struggle, you have to look at the biology of cockatoos. They are highly social, extremely intelligent flock animals. In the wild, their entire survival depends on the flock.
So they stick together.
Yeah. Exactly. In captivity, a cockatoo will often imprint on one specific human, treating them as their mate or their flock leader. So they don't just, enjoy their owner. They will defend that person with the exact same ferocity they'd use to defend a nest against a predator in the wild.
Wow. Which perfectly explains the brutal scene police walked into. The house had been completely ransacked.
Right.
Drawers were pulled out. Furniture was overturned, indicating this massive struggle. Kevin was found bound with electrical cord, suffering from multiple stab wounds.
It's just awful.
It is. But when officers moved into the kitchen, they found Bird. The cockatoo was dead. He was missing a leg, his wings were broken, and he had a fatal stab wound to the back.
Gosh. So whoever broke into that house didn't just fight Kevin, they fought the bird.
Yeah.
And more importantly, they walked out bleeding. Bird's beak and claws were completely covered in blood.
Right. And when the initial forensic testing came back, it revealed that the blood didn't belong to Bird, and it didn't belong to Kevin.
Okay, let's unpack this. It's like Bird acted as the ultimate biological home security system.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
He couldn't call 911, so he literally took a DNA sample from the intruder, held onto it, and just waited for the police.
That is exactly how the prosecution framed it later on. Investigators pulled DNA from 4 separate locations inside the house, including Bird's beak, a light switch, and the handles of 2 knives left at the scene.
Wow.
Now, back in 2002, DNA testing in everyday casework wasn't nearly as fast as it is today.
Oh, definitely not. It could take ages.
Right. The Dallas County Crime Lab was running months behind, so it took 7 agonizing months to get the results. Initially, police heavily suspected a 22-year-old former employee named Johnny Cerna.
Okay.
Kevin had recently fired him for altering a company check, and Cerna lived just a block behind Kevin's house.
Seems like the obvious suspect.
But the blood on the beak didn't match Cerna. It actually matched Cerna's 30-year-old half-brother, Daniel Torres.
Wow.
And when police confronted Torres with the DNA evidence pulled directly from the cockatoo, his story entirely fell apart.
I bet it did. What did he say?
He tried to claim he was just there trying to break up a fight between his brother and Kevin, but he admitted that during the struggle, Bird flew off the porch and actively attacked him.
He actually admitted that.
Yeah. Torres told police the bird was pecking him, quote, all over my head, and he had to grab a fork to stab at the bird to make it stop.
That is intense. And, in the trial, the prosecutor explicitly told the jury that the bird spoke for them.
Yeah.
Bird gave his life defending his owner, but in doing so, he left the precise physical mark that put both Daniel Torres and Johnny Cerna in handcuffs for capital murder.
Which is just incredible. But, while Bird fought back physically, sometimes a pet doesn't need to attack an intruder to solve a crime.
Right.
Sometimes just leaving the house is enough to completely collapse a killer's timeline. Let's head to Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania in September 2018.
Okay, moving forward a bit.
Yeah. So it's 3:01 in the morning, and a single panicked golden retriever is found wandering the quiet streets. He eventually wanders into a Turkey Hill mini-mart.
Like a convenience store.
Exactly. An officer named Ziegler shows up, checks the dog's collar, sees the name Joe, and an address, 14 Donald Court.
So he just takes the dog home.
Yeah, Ziegler decides to do the neighborly thing and just drive the dog home.
But what starts as a completely routine lost dog call turns into a homicide investigation before the sun even comes up.
It's crazy.
When Ziegler arrives at 14 Donald Court at 4 a.m., the lights are blazing, and the front door is wide open. Nobody answers the bell. Backup arrives, they clear the house, and they find a horrific scene.
Yeah, the owner, 58-year-old Fred Boot, has been murdered in his upstairs bedroom. There's an 8.5-inch knife nearby, obvious signs of a struggle, and this chilling detail, a red gas can, sitting right next to the victim's body.
The killer was clearly planning to burn the house down to cover their tracks, but got spooked and left.
Right. And what blows my mind about Joe wandering out that open door is how it instantly applied police pressure. Investigators call this the golden hour, right?
Yes, that critical window where evidence is fresh.
Exactly.
What's fascinating here is how the dog entirely removed the killer's head start.
Right?
Usually a victim who lives alone might not be discovered for days. That gives a killer time to dispose of clothing, craft an alibi, or leave the state calmly.
But Joe walked into that mini-mart.
Exactly. Because of that, the police were inside the house within an hour of the murder. They immediately contacted Fred's son, Brian, who pinged his dad's missing cell phone. That ping showed the phone was just a few blocks away on Willow Street. The dragnet was already tightening before breakfast.
And because the timeline was so incredibly compressed, the killer started making desperate, sloppy mistakes.
Panic sets in.
Yeah. Later that same day, around 1:00 p.m., firefighters respond to a deliberately set fire in the basement of a nearby apartment building. They find a pile of bloody clothing and shoes burning under some tar paper.
Wow.
The soles of those half-burned shoes are an exact match for bloody footprints leaving Fred's bedroom.
So the suspect was trying to destroy evidence in broad daylight because they realized the police were already crawling all over the neighborhood.
Exactly. And the mistakes kept compounding. Earlier that morning, surveillance cameras caught a man walking into a local hospital. His hands were badly torn up and bleeding.
Oh, defensive wounds.
Actually, no. These were classic knife slippage wounds. The specific injuries you get when you're stabbing something forcefully and your sweaty grip slides down the handle onto the blade.
I see.
And add one more piece to the puzzle. A woman walks into the police station to report her 14-year-old daughter missing. She says her daughter left with your boyfriend, who happens to be the exact same guy with the torn-up hands at the hospital.
Unbelievable.
4 completely isolated incidents: a wandering dog, a basement arson, a hospital visit, and a missing teen. All happening simultaneously because Joe set the clock ticking.
And the suspect was 31-year-old Ronaldo Marcato. He had been staying in the building where the arson happened. By the time police connected the hospital visit, the arson, and the missing teen, Marcato had fled to West New York, planning to escape to the Dominican Republic.
But he made a mistake.
He made one final mistake, driven by the sheer speed of the investigation. He confessed to his uncle, and he actually pulled up the local Wilkes-Barre news reports to prove it. Because the body was discovered at 4 a.m., the headlines were already out that same afternoon.
That is wild.
His uncle called the police, and Marcato was arrested the next day, eventually receiving a life sentence.
Wow. So Joe the dog helped police by changing the physical timeline. But sometimes a pet alters a case in a completely different way. Yeah, by keeping a record of the past long after the victim is gone. Let's look at a case where the evidence wasn't physical but auditory.
Okay, this sounds intense.
It is. We are moving to San Fernando, Argentina in December 2018. A police officer is standing guard outside a house where a crime has just occurred. The forensics team hasn't even arrived yet.
Just securing the scene.
Right. Suddenly, from inside the house, the officer hears a woman scream, "Oh, please let me go, oh no."
Which should be impossible.
Yeah.
The only person inside that house is the victim, a 46-year-old woman named Elizabeth, or Ellie, Toledo, and she is already dead.
Yeah.
The officer draws his weapon, goes in to check, and traces the voice to a cage against the wall. The screams are coming from Ellie's green parrot, Patchouli. The bird is shrieking those exact words in a tone of absolute desperation at full volume.
So, wait, I have to ask about the mechanics of this, because it sounds like a horror movie. Did the parrot just have a photographic memory for sound? Did it just, hit record during the exact moment of the murder?
Well, the science of parrot mimicry makes this infinitely more heartbreaking, honestly. Depending on the species, a parrot can learn up to 150 words, but to commit a complex phrase to memory, it requires massive repetition.
Okay.
A parrot doesn't just hear a sentence once during a single chaotic traumatic event and perfectly memorize the phonetics of the emotional tone. For Patchouli to say, "Oh, please let me go," oh no, with that specific, desperate inflection, Ellie would have had to say those words over and over across multiple weeks or even months.
Oh, man. So this wasn't an audio recording of her final moments. It was a terrifying record of her daily life.
Precisely. Ellie had a moderate intellectual disability, and she shared her home with 3 men, including her partner and a 64-year-old man named George Alvarez. The investigation revealed a long, dark history of ongoing abuse that had never been formally reported to the police.
Jeez.
So the parrot was essentially an audio black box of the environment.
Here's where it gets really interesting and just deeply sad. A neighbor down the street who ran a small shop and used to sell Ellie birdseed came forward to testify.
Oh, what did she say?
She told police that she had previously heard Patchouli the parrot repeat a completely different phrase. The phrase was, "Why did you hit me?"
Wow.
And she remembered hearing it right around the time one of the men in the house had been kicked out by the landlord for physically abusing Ellie.
That is just chilling. The words Patchouli learned were formally entered into the case file as evidence. Now, to be clear, the parrot's mimicry wasn't the sole basis for the murder conviction.
Right, they need more than that.
Exactly. The physical evidence against George Alvarez was overwhelming. His DNA matched organic remains found on Ellie during the autopsy, and an eyewitness placed him at the house during the time of the attack.
Alvarez was convicted of aggravated sexual assault and femicide and sentenced to life in prison.
But the parrot's vocalizations provided the context for the jury. It proved to the court what her reality had been like leading up to her death. It's a haunting thought, that this bird carried the only surviving record of her suffering.
It really is.
Okay, so we've seen pets fight back. We've seen them force a killer into making sloppy mistakes, and we've heard them vocalize trauma. Now, let's look at a pet passively shedding a single hair, and in the process, changing the history of forensic science forever.
Oh, this is a landmark case.
It really is. We're heading to Prince Edward Island, Canada in October 1994. A 32-year-old mother of 5 named Shirley DeGuay goes missing. She was tiny, only 4'9" and under 100 pounds. She actually used a pillow in the driver's seat of her car just to see over the steering wheel.
A few days after she vanishes, her car is found abandoned in a field. Inside, there's blood spatter everywhere, and her driving pillow is soaked in blood.
Now, Prince Edward Island is Canada's smallest province. It's a very close-knit, quiet community where violent crime was extremely rare. So Shirley's disappearance launched one of the largest searches the province had ever seen.
Yeah, everybody was looking.
The military, the local police academy, and hundreds of residents spent months combing the area.
And eventually they start finding items. About a half-mile from the car, they uncover a shovel with 2 long black hairs that microscopically match Shirley's hairbrush. Weeks later, and 15 miles away, they find a plastic bag hidden in the woods. Inside the bag are bloody size 9 white sneakers and a large man's brown leather jacket.
Okay.
The blood on the jacket matches Shirley. Now, police already had a prime suspect. Shirley's extremely abusive ex-partner, Douglas Beamish. She had spent 15 years with him. He had a documented history of domestic violence, and there was a peace bond, which is Canada's version of a restraining order, issued against him. He had even written her a letter threatening to kill her.
So the motive is incredibly clear. But when police question Beamish, who was living with his parents at the time, he denies everything. He denies knowing where she is. He denies the size 9 sneakers are his, even though he literally wears a size 9.
Of course.
And he absolutely denies owning that brown leather jacket.
Right.
Without a body and without a direct physical link tying him to that jacket, the police are completely stuck.
Until a forensic investigator spots a tiny detail. Inside the lining of that bloody leather jacket, they found roughly 20 brittle white hairs.
Just ordinary hairs.
Yeah, but sometime later, Constable Roger Savoy is at Beamish's parents' house interviewing him. While they're talking, a pure white cat named Snowball rubs up against Savoy's leg, shedding fine white hairs onto his trousers.
Wow, what a coincidence.
Right, hairs that look remarkably like the ones pulled from the jacket lining. So what does this all mean? Do they just put the cat hair under a microscope, say, yep, it looks the same, and arrest him?
Well, no.
Because, wait, this was 1994. Human DNA profiling was still finding its footing in the court systems. There is no way a judge just accepted cat DNA without a massive legal fight.
You've hit on the exact hurdle they faced. Animal DNA had never been used in a criminal investigation anywhere in the world.
Really? Never.
Never. There was no forensic framework, no legal precedent, and honestly, most scientists thought it was a waste of time. Constable Savoy started calling DNA labs all across Canada and the U.S., basically begging anyone to test cat hair.
That must have been frustrating.
Finally, he connects with Dr. Stephen O'Brien at the National Cancer Institute in Maryland. Dr. O'Brien was a geneticist studying hereditary illnesses in cats and had the raw capability to do the test.
And even with a willing geneticist, the science almost failed them. Out of the 20 white hairs they pulled from the jacket, only one single hair had an intact root.
Which is crucial.
Right, because to pull a unique genetic profile, you need nuclear DNA, which is found in the cells at the root of the hair. The rest of the hair shaft only contains mitochondrial DNA, which can only trace a maternal lineage, meaning it could point to a whole family of cats, not just one specific animal. So this entire groundbreaking legal theory came down to one microscopic hair follicle.
And the pressure was immense. Dr. O'Brien's team adapted human DNA profiling techniques for feline DNA, and they tested the nuclear DNA from that single root against a blood sample taken from Snowball. It was a perfect match at every single genetic marker.
Wow.
But the defense team was smart, and they immediately attacked the statistical relevance of that match. This raises an important question. Prince Edward Island is an island. It's geographically isolated.
Right. So the defense is going to argue that all the cats on the island are basically cousins.
Exactly. They argued that the entire cat population was heavily inbred. Maybe 20% of the cats on the island shared the exact same genetic profile. If that were true, the match to Snowball would be statistically meaningless in a court of law.
Which is such an annoying, brilliant defense strategy for 1994. So how do you beat it?
With sheer scientific rigor, Dr. O'Brien's team couldn't just test Snowball. They had to prove Snowball was unique. They acquired blood samples from 20 random cats from all across Prince Edward Island to map the local feline genetics.
They just drove around collecting cat blood.
Yeah, they basically built the first local cat DNA database from scratch. The results proved that the population was highly diverse, and they calculated that the probability of that white hair coming from any cat other than Snowball was roughly 1 in 45 million.
1 in 45 million. That number definitively linked the bloody jacket to Douglas Beamish. Several months later, a trout fisherman found Shirley's body in a shallow grave along a riverbank, confirming she had died from blunt force trauma and strangulation.
So tragic.
With the groundbreaking cat DNA presented alongside the human blood evidence, Beamish was convicted of second-degree murder in 1996. It was the very first murder conviction in the history of the world based on animal DNA.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it really forces us to reevaluate our environment. In every single one of these cases, the perpetrator thought they were alone with their victim.
Yeah.
They thought they had controlled the scene, eliminated the human witnesses, and successfully erased their tracks. But they completely ignored the biological witnesses sitting right there in the room with them.
We underestimate our cats all the time. We see them as, background characters in the movie of our lives, but they are interacting with their environments. They are protecting us. They are forcing killers to make sloppy mistakes. They are shedding on our clothes. And sometimes they are memorizing our voices so they can speak for us when we no longer can.
Beautifully said.
So, next time your dog nudges your hand for a pet or your cat sheds all over your favorite dark jacket, just remember how deeply they are woven into the fabric of your life. They aren't just pets, they are a massive part of your biological footprint.
It really leaves you with something to consider. Because if our biological companions are constantly absorbing our routines, our stress, our voices, and our physical traces, well, it makes you wonder about the modern environment we're building around ourselves today.
What do you mean?
Think about it. What invisible digital DNA Are our smart home devices picking up in exactly the same way? The microphones that are always listening, the sensors that know exactly when we open a door. Will the future's greatest silent witnesses be biological, or will they be entirely technological?
Wow. That is a heavy, fascinating thought to leave on. Thank you all so much for joining us for this deep dive. Keep asking questions, keep looking at the details, and we'll see you next time.